All right, I think we are good to kick off here. What's up, everyone? Happy Tuesday. I'm going to try and bring the energy like Megan. Great to have you back. The weather is getting nicer out here. And so we know the people that are on here are ultra dedicated, which is cool. We're going to keep holding it down every Tuesday here on Demand Gen Live, despite how it's going to finally be beautiful. We've lived through the entire winter here in Boston, and now it's starting to perk up. But on Tuesdays, we are committed to being here. So let's get into it. The first topic that I'm going to cover today, it could be a short one, it could be a long one. We'll see where it ends up, but I'm just here to try and finally close the book and set the record straight on this one in terms of understanding the business rationale as to why sourced revenue from a marketing standpoint is better, just flat out better than on influence revenue as a primary marketing metric from a business standpoint, right? We've talked about before about why it breaks down in terms of trying to go and get more budget, why it breaks down in terms of chasing attribution and doing tactics that are easy to measure and incentivizing marketers to do those things. But now we're going to talk about the business side for the head of sales, for the CEO, for the CMO, for those types of people. The business rationale of why marketing should focus on sourced revenue primarily is because the sourced revenue component, you can go back into all of your Salesforce data and check against this between sourced and influenced. They're going to have higher win rates, shorter sales cycles, better pipeline velocity, lower customer acquisition costs, and generally a much more scalable channel than scaling an influence model with sales headcount. There are so many reasons why to focus on source as the primary and use influenced as a way to understand how you're improving outbound, to understand those things in order to guide decisions, not drive decisions, to guide decisions. Because in a lot of cases, when we're talking about demand marketing here, the qualitative insights are actually better data points than the quant that you see in your CRM or in marketing automation or in Visible or any of those types of things. And so I'm gonna keep going on this one, but that was like pretty clear. I think I made my point here. And the other reason to focus on sourced is from an alignment issue with sales. And what I found as a demand marketer over and over is that a lot of marketers think directly about, I need to help sales, so I'm going to focus on pipeline deals and I've done this before, going to big meetings with the sales team to try and help them close it, focused on just running ads to certain accounts, focused on webinars for just certain accounts. But what sales really wants is for them to not have to think about anything and for a demand marketer to put 50% of their quota in the door every quarter. That's what a sales rep really wants. They want to be like, okay, I know quarter over quarter that half of my quota is going to get delivered through marketing. All I need to do is go out and get the other 50%. I can go and do that, right? Marketers can help with influence. Marketers can help with pipeline marketing. But the number one way to get aligned with your sales team is to focus on giving them deals that popped out of nowhere, that they think that are coming on autopilot, that help them get to their goals. And so I've done both of those things, I think, for a variety of business reasons. Sourced revenue just entirely trumps influence as a primary marketing metric.
For the audience and the listeners, Chris, people would benefit from your definition of the difference between sourced and influence. Can you go back to basics for a minute and break that down?
Yeah. So when we think about the source, I think about when a buying process is being initiated by the buyer, are we going to them or are they coming to us? That's what I want to know. That's what's going to dictate the better win rates, the shorter sales cycles, all the metrics that I put forward when the buyer takes that step versus when we take that step to them. And so on an influence model, for the most part, it's going to be marketing has some type of attribution, whether it was pre-op creation or during op creation on a sales source deal, which will have lower win rates, longer sales cycles, lower pipeline velocity, more difficult to scale. Versus sourced revenue, where a buyer comes to your website and says, hey, I would love to talk to your sales rep about buying your product. And trying as a marketer to try and get more and more companies that are qualified accounts to come to your website and do that because you just win more of them. It's not complicated. And so that's the difference. As a marketer, the number one metric for me is how many qualified buyers are coming to us to buy our stuff, and how much better are the win rates, how much shorter are the sales cycles, and how much lower is the customer acquisition cost of buyers doing that versus buyers that are influenced, that create an outbound action. And so I think the blend of that revenue from a company standpoint, if you look at the blend of the amount of buyers coming to you to buy versus the amount of buyers that you're going to buy, and not at pipeline, at actual revenue, you want that split to be at least 50% of your revenue is coming from buyers coming to you to buy. And then there's going to be some amount, like if you have a partner channel, 25% partner, 25% sales source, other people break it up a little bit differently. Every company is unique, but those are general guidelines that I think is a good place to strive for.
On the influence side, I mean, clearly we all agree sourced is better, but on the influence side, are there some specific tactics that come to mind that are effective tactics to help influence that you do think work well over others?
Yeah. So the challenge that I talk about a lot with influence is that it only is going to give credit to things that can be measured, whether or not they make the most impact.
Right.
And we've gone down this train before, right? Like, I know that the impact of a CMO that watches my video when they have a proposal on their desk and they actually consume it, the amount of impact that that makes. Can't track it, never see it. We'll never get that in the data, but I know that that makes more impact than me sending them a cold email, than doing other touch points that are out there. But the lack of tracking is sort of where marketers get stuck here. So there's tons of touch points that matter, that influence revenue. I would argue, and I argued in the last time that I debated this topic, is that marketing influences all revenue. It's just whether or not you can attribute it.
So things like podcasting, organic social posting, all of those things that we talk about, those are really the right tactics to invest in from an influence standpoint.
It depends on your business. If you are not executing those things well, then they probably won't be, right? And so it's not only the tactic or the channel, it comes down a lot to the execution. There are certain channels that have greater upside, that have more probability to be successful, but ultimately it comes down to how you execute.
I love it. Let's roll.
All right.
I love the two other agenda topics. Let's roll into the next, and I'll get some questions going from this crowd.
Cool. The next one I'm going to go to, and I've been talking about this for a while, but now I've probably been talking about this since I started my company, 2019. And the premise is, and now we're actually starting to see some of these things play out in real life. And the statement is, the best way to get earned media is to execute flawlessly on owned channels. And most companies operate backwards. I get 100 cold emails a month from agencies pitching random people that I've never heard of to come on our podcast. Guess how many times I've said yes? 0. They still come, right? And so that's someone trying to get earned media before they've actually executed on own channels, at least enough to get the attention of somebody that I want to have them on their show, right? In the reverse, if you focus on own channels first and executing really well on that, one, it gives you way more control long-term. You have the operational infrastructure, you have control over your own distribution system, not on a third party. There's just so many benefits to doing it. And if you do it well, you attract a lot of earned media because you're out there, because people see what you're doing, because they see your point of view, because they're more aware of you, because they understand that your point of view is resonating with other people, and they want their audience to also be exposed to that because they care about what the content that's being delivered to their audience. And so at the beginning, and I'm just going to walk through some of the progressions here. At the beginning, people asked me for free consulting. I still did it. I did it because I could create content. And then people asked me if I would be a guest on their podcast. Being a guest on a podcast right now, if you do it in the right way, is one of the best strategies. I have meetings with growth equity firms because they heard about something that I was saying on somebody else's podcast about going in there and helping all of their companies, right? And so getting on someone else's podcast gets you exposure to a whole new audience. depending on the podcast, it can be incredibly impactful. And the best way to get on to that podcast is to be invited because they like your point of view and they know how to interview you so that it aligns with what their audience wants and likes. And so was invited as guest on podcast. If you do it well, we also repurpose those and use them as our own, put them on our own podcast. And so I get to be a guest. I get the distribution of that. We also get the content creation. We put it on our own podcast, which allows us to do 3 episodes a week. The next thing is that it's sort of slowed down because of what's happening in the world, but it's already picking back up. I have several events already scheduled where getting invited to be a speaker at events where other companies would pay $10,000 to $100,000 to have their person at this event speak and come, and we're getting it for free, and potentially we're going to get paid to do it in the future. And then the next thing that happened, I'm sure a lot of people saw it, is that there was a nice article written about my company in Forbes, which was out of the blue and, incredibly flattering because of the execution through owned channels. I'm not going to cold email the writer, Kevin, contributor of Forbes, and say, hey, Kevin, you want to write about me? So you need to be able to put yourself in places where people are aware of you, where those opportunities can happen. And if you can control it, the earned, like if I just talk through the progression of being a guest on podcasts where there's 10 people listening, and all the way to the progression of where we are right now and what it can look like in the future, I just don't see how companies don't see how the cards play out over the next 3 to 5 years and why they wouldn't start doing this. They're paying a PR firm 25 or 30 grand to work on analyst relations and write and edit press releases and put together organic content that none of their audience wants and never sees because they don't follow the page. And it's like, we need to start rethinking what a PR firm does. So I'll pause there.
I think what it was pleasantly surprising to me about the lovely Forbes article about you, Chris, was also how impactful that article was in gaining another subset of attention from different people. Like I think I've personally felt like those articles, that's cool, but nothing special. But it actually, I think, got us in front of a different set of eyes. And so it gave me a better respect for some of that earned media too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it actually can work really, really well and drive meaningful business results if done, I think, in the stages that you described. So that was cool. I have more respect for it.
And so, you can hire a firm and you can try and pull some strings and get into some of those places. You're going to pay for it. And the question is it even that impactful, right? Like I look at this as like a massive snowball rolling where everything is like another part of it. If this is asynchronous, where you're just like, one time going over here and then radio silent for the next 3 months until you can get onto your next spot, I'm not sure that the impact would be as high. We need to have a consistent output cadence when we think about owned channels, and then earned becomes the additional sort of like amplifier on top of that, is the way that I see it.
You want to break to a few questions before
I would love that.
The last agenda.
I would love that.
All right. Scott, you asked a great question. I am going to unmute you. I'm having trouble with this lately, but I think I got this. Let's bring you on the show and you can ask this question about podcasting live. All right. You're unmuted.
Hey, y'all. Can you hear me?
We can.
Scott, what's up? It looks pretty nice out there, man. I like your shades.
Yeah. The one sunny day in Seattle in the spring, so I'm taking full advantage of it.
Nice. Awesome. What can I help with?
The question that I have, so I'm pretty aligned to your sort of philosophy in terms of owned media and podcasting. What I'm struggling with now is sort of entering into a new industry that is fresh to me, using podcasting as a way to sort of uncover and understand the problems that they're having as an industry, similar to what you did sort of early days in the medical
100%.
Before, I'm struggling with the spot of, I don't know enough about the industry to provide a lot of value to them, but I have some ideas coming from sort of the digital space to a space that isn't traditionally digitally savvy. And how do I kind of like build that legitimacy with them before I've done anything of note to provide enough value to get them on the phone or on a podcast?
Yeah. Can you clarify just a little bit more specific, like who this person is, so I can help you more?
Yeah, sure. So SMBs, specifically like independent bike dealers. So super small, typically like owned by one person. Typically not like super business savvy, but like independents, maybe have 2 or 3 employees underneath them.
So when you're in this mode, which is more so the interviewer of a podcast mode, the value exchange is that they're flattered that you want to interview them on your podcast. Like, you don't need to think about how to provide value on this one. Be like, hey, I'm Scott. Blah, 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 blah. We're working on this thing. One of my goals for this year is to create the, independent bike dealers podcast. We're going to interview 50 over the next 52 months. We're going to once a week, we're going to interview 52 different independent bike dealers. And we selected you as one of them. Would love to schedule you to be on the show for 30 minutes to talk through what you're seeing in the market or what you're working on here or different things. And a lot of people will say yes to that. And then the way to identify, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Your theory there is like, it's just kind of long tail enough that they're flattered to even be acknowledged and be on it.
It doesn't even need to be long tail. You know what I mean? Like I send messages, but people know me more, but I did this when a lot of people didn't know me. And I would send messages to VPs of marketing at $50 million SaaS companies, and they would say yes.
Sure.
Right. And so it doesn't necessarily be the long tail. It's just the idea that people like to talk about the things that they know. And so if you can personalize that and different things, and then just figure out what's important to them, right? Like you can go and look, and like I would pick people that didn't have like a large video output on LinkedIn, and the value that I would provide to people that were sort of like out of my league, so to speak, is that I would tell them that after the interview, we're going to post produce, and I'm going to give you 9 awesome videos that look like mine that you'll be able to post. So you can have video. You've only done text, like video is working really well for us. You can do video. And so there's little things that you can do. I'm not sure that you're going to need that, to be honest. And then the way to identify who you want is probably some type of social search, right? Like I would imagine that there are a lot of SMB independent bike dealers that have an Instagram presence. And so you can start to prioritize sort of based on that, because they have existing audience or already creating content, are more likely to say yes, and probably have some more interesting things to say, frankly. And so that would be a potential path in terms of like identifying who they are. And then you need to figure out what are the things that you're trying to figure out, right? So you need to go into with a plan. It can be curious and open-ended, but you sort of have to have directionally about what you're trying to learn and figure out. And then just, iterate, execute, keep going. And as you go, it will become more clear what you're really trying to learn.
Yeah, that's awesome feedback. I appreciate it.
Cool.
And just to reinforce, since I started my own separate podcast, I think I've only had 3 people out of the 35 that I've asked say no, or not now, or not respond. Like literally 9 out of 10 people will say, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. People report 80 to 90% success rate on these.
That's crazy high. Much higher than I would have expected. Well, now I have no excuses.
I know.
Yeah. That's our job here. Remove all the excuses. Go get it done, Scott.
We can report back at a future DBL.
Cheers.
Will do.
All right. We have some of my favorites. Bob, I'm going to bring you on next. Lead sources, something like that.
Sure.
You got the floor.
Yeah, I have some questions. Hey, thanks. I have some questions regarding the best way to set up lead sources and deal sources. Listening to you in the past, I think I'm probably mixing some up, and wanted to get your insights on what I should really be doing. I'm primarily, we have 2 main sources at this point: external referrals. Someone's commenting the birdies in the background, but yeah,
that's cool.
I'm outside.
Sounds good.
So external referral I'm using is like a catch-all for our industry partners and existing big key accounts that we have like ongoing business that comes in from them, new deals, new locations with an
sort
existing
of like channel.
customer.
Sort of like channel.
That's what it basically, I'm calling it channel, and it's multiple partners. And so that right now is our main catch-all. And then, cold call, Social media is our other main catch-all. So you'll be happy to know we just, our current pipeline has flipped over to where it is now. Our current future pipeline is now 60% marketing sourced, as I'm calling it.
From zero?
From zero.
Nice. Look at you, Bob. It's been a
almost
cool
zero.
journey.
Yeah, almost there. I mean, again, now we had a tremendous first quarter that we hit 300% of quota. But it was all big key accounts that all closed like in the first quarter. That were like multi-year sales cycle. And the other thing I'm tracking is that on this social media channel, it's by far, it's cut our forecasted sales cycles like 50% of the time. So all the things you talk about are totally true. So that's why I wanted to try to line this up a little bit more as we start to do this more. I wanted to tighten it up, the reporting. And so I have Chatbot, which I convert a lot of stuff through, but I can see that they're coming to the chat via social media. So I can see like exactly how they got referred in. So I've just been making them social media in our CRM. I've been making the deal source. I'm using 6-month last touch attribution. And so I'm basically saying, however they came to us in the last 6 months, that's what we're going to call the deal source. And then if it's been dead for a long time and my SDR outreached and regenerated it with cold call, now we're calling it cold call. We have a few of them, right? But so any, I have, 8 or 9 things in my system I could use. I can always add more. I'm running Zoho. It's not automated except like I'm converting it. When I convert the lead in Zoho, I'm selecting the drop down box, and like that's where we're at right now, still pre-equity, right? So any advice you have for the setup?
So I'm going to try and balance this with like the way that I think that I'll paint the way that like we do it. And then you're probably going to want to find a happy medium because the level of complexity may not be worth it for you right now. And so the way that I look at it, like you have partner, and then the next one would be sales, like outbound. I would call that sales. And then the next one would be marketing or inbound. I like calling it outbound instead of sales and inbound instead of marketing, so that people know it's about how the buyer got to us, not who sourced it. This is not a who, you know what I mean? I just think it from a like alignment issue. I think it presents better. And then inside of the department source, you're going to have breakdowns. Inside of marketing, you might have website, you might have conference, you might have this. I call that source, right? So it's top level where they got to you. Inside of sales, you might have the same thing. You might have, an outbound, part-time outbound firm, or a contracted outbound firm. You might have a couple internal SDRs, and you might have some other outbound motion running. So then you have that, blah, blah, blah. If you go into the marketing side, if you have conferences, website, affiliates, blah, 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 underneath that, you're going to have the conversion point. This matters a lot when you think about website stuff. And so underneath website, the conversion point, which I would call source detail, would be demo request, chat, contact us, that type of thing. And then the last source detail 2 would be the referral channel. They came from LinkedIn, they came from Google, they came from G2. And you sort of have the whole path. But you see how they're different. It's the location or like the property where they converted would be the source. The action that they took as a surrogate to buying intent, potentially, especially on a website, would be second, source detail 1. And then the channel or referral source, which also has an impact on win rates, would be source detail 2. In a manual effort, this is going to be incredibly challenging, so I'd recommend not doing it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I appreciate your insight. I don't even think I have the technical capability within Zoho the way I have it currently set up. So it is what it is at this point. But I was looking for.
I think for right now, what you want to have is you just want to have top level, and then you want to have some details on your marketing source so that you can make better decisions.
Sure.
Yeah.
Appreciate it for sure. Thank you.
Cool. Good to see you. Enjoy the sun.
Thanks, Bob. Blake, I'll bring you on next. You had a good question. And then I'm going to ask the anonymous question.
Ooh.
Wait for it.
Drum roll.
Blake,
Man,
you're on.
Hey.
It's tough to lead before the anonymous question.
I know. You got a good one, though.
Anonymous has big shoes to fill after your question, Blake.
So here's my question. So Chris, I know you talk about all the time, setting a good content strategy comes with like expertise, right? And having like a true expertise and understanding of your buyer. So we don't have an internal SME that we can really leverage. And so we're, looking to work with an outside SME that's like, we're going to, kind of work with on a contract basis to create content for us. And so, really excited about that. But my question is, how would you, I know you've talked about it before, but how would you go about setting the content strategy working with an external SME?
I think that it's essentially the similar to if the SME was internal, which is that it's the marketing team's responsibility to put that person in the exact scenarios with the right topics and the right guests and all those different things to demonstrate their expertise and help people, right? And so it would be your job to understand. You might not be a subject matter expert for your buyer, but you should understand your buyer well enough and collect feedback from them and understand other people that are influential that work with them about what they would want and who they would listen to, right? And so then set up this contract SME with 3 or 4 people in different interview settings with people that your audience already listens to, and set a topic and build an event and put everything together so that contract person only needs to show up, present their expertise, answer questions, do different things like that. That's the way that I would approach it. I think when left like too open-ended, especially in SME that's not already creating content, which would be more like a brand collaboration sponsorship type play. If they're not already creating content for that audience and an open-ended scope, I think it would get potentially messy.
Okay, yeah, because that's what I mean. I've been trying to like think about it, and I know like Dave Gerhardt always talks about you got to have guardrails for anything in marketing. I've been trying to think of our guardrails for this because it's something new that we haven't tried before, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like thinking through what's going to be the best like medium for them. So I know had just suggested there like get them on a panel or you have like a live event or a webinar or something like that. Is that kind of what you think would be the best play? Is like get them in front, like this is someone that's not really creating a whole lot of content right now. They do a lot of written, but don't do a lot of like formal presenting. Do you think that the live presentation AMA style panel could be a play that might work for them, or just I have to be the judge of that?
It could. I'll just give you an alternative. You seem like you're pretty far down that direction, but I'll just give you an alternative or two, which could be that there's a couple like sort of steps that you could take before this to know that it's the right way to go, right? And so you could start a podcast and interview people that you think are influential in different things like that, and you might stumble upon somebody that you align with better than the person that you have right now. And you also get to learn the operations in the industry and different things like that. That's an option. I don't know exactly your situation. It might not be right for you. Another one would be, instead of just choosing one person and start sort of going all in with them, consider doing like smaller things with several people at once, right? So instead of having this person do something once a week, consider trying to have 4 people that do something once a month, and sort of like gives you a little bit more variety. It's going to be tougher to manage, but I think it's a good, if you have the capabilities and bandwidth, it's a nice idea to really like test and figure out which way it goes, right? Because if on the off chance you put this person in and it's not working, you may not know if it's the strategy or if it's the specific person. And so having a couple of different looks gives you some good insight. And honestly, like if you did either one of those 2 things that I mentioned and it worked well, you might get to a place where you don't have a part-time SME because you've proven out the thing and you just get a full-time person.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's a great, kind of way to think about it. Cause that was going to be my like last question. Cause we've, looked at hiring one on full-time, and right now, it's the people that we're like targeting, just like not lining up, all the way. That's why we're looking to go the part-time route. But so I've considered that, having multiple ones, like not like putting all of our eggs in one basket, but looking at like, hey, let's get 3 or 4 guys or gals. But so for the content that they're creating, do you think if they were focused on the same topic, like if there was overlap, that'd be okay just to see how it goes? or do you think they should like focus on, I mean, there's only a couple of core topics.
Yeah, I think the thing that you're going to have to distinguish here is that this podcast is to distribute information that's helpful to your buyer, not necessarily communicate your company's point of view. Right. And so it's just taking people, right? So it doesn't even need to look like they're like that person. It's just, you know, this event starring, you know, whoever, Susie, the person, like one of the 4 people that you have. And then you could do another, and then the next one, it would be, you know, first Fridays of every month with Susie, and then this one with this person. And you can have like a couple different shows or formats, right? So you can have one that's video, that's Q&A, that for the person that you think would be best at Q&A. You could have another one that's a podcast with a guest interview where you interview, you know, potential target accounts or whoever you're going after with somebody else. Tends to be a better interviewer and know how to ask questions. I think there's ways where you can test out like formats that fits people's skills. It'd be a considerable lift, but those are some ideas.
Awesome. Well, hey, no, I appreciate you always, you know, going down the rabbit hole of my follow-up questions, but
yeah.
That's really helpful, and I'll report back what we find.
Looking forward to it. Good luck, Blake.
All right. Thanks, guys.
One last thing I'll just add for you, Blake, because it sounds like you're already going to be working with this person. I think having a direct conversation with them of like, what do you think you're good at? What are you comfortable doing? Like kind of involving them as part of the strategy. I would also think about if you were to hire this person as an employee, what type of onboarding would you put them through? And what might you want to do with them prior to content creation to give them, they're clearly a subject matter expert in your industry, but give them additional context about your company, your customer, and things like that. So I would just like involve them in the strategy more potentially, and then like almost consider them as a full-time employee and treat them as such, to give them some of that additional onboarding and context that will be helpful to them. So sounds like you're kind of like far down that path. So those are just a couple of things you can do you can consider as you go forward.
Yeah, this is more not for you, Blake, more for everyone. But the place where I've messed up before earlier in my career is that I put not only the subject matter expertise, but also part of the content creation or the operational side on the subject matter expert. And that's not the place that I just haven't had success with that. It's like their job is subject matter expertise and somebody else is the architect of everything that's happening underneath it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, no, that's helpful. And Megan, thank you for that. That's like, I'll channel my inner Megan Bowen during that conversation, but
nice.
That'll be helpful. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Good to see you.
Like,
good seeing you guys.
The moment you've all been waiting for since 7:30 p.m. Eastern, the anonymous question. This is a fun one. Okay, so Chris, how would you respond to a CFO who says, hey, I'm going to pay my salesperson less commission if they close a deal that marketing sourced because they're basically ready to buy and we already had to, invest in the marketing budget? That seems kind of crazy, but what would you say to a CFO who wants to make a justification for paying salespeople less for marketing sourced opportunities?
I would tell them to look at how much it costs them to get a sales sourced opportunity and realize that it's more expensive. And so if they were going to pay less commissions from a financial standpoint, it would actually be smarter to pay less commissions on the sales source deals to offset the increased customer acquisition cost, which is out of left field and something that people would not expect, but that's the truth. If the CFO is coming in that to try and save money, there's other places to save money and that data will look the same. There's absolutely no reason to pay lower commissions on marketing source deals for sales. It's a team of different sources of qualified accounts and leads and different things like that lead to revenue. And all of them are valuable. And I just don't agree with that approach.
Good answer. Wasn't sure where you're going to go with that one.
I mean, I wasn't really sure either, but sometimes, especially when it's like, what if a CFO asks? Sometimes I just come in there with some gold.
I know. All right. Well, anonymous question and your answer did not disappoint. Okay. We have another budding podcaster, Jude. I'm going to bring you on live so you can ask your question. And then I've got a cool question to ask on behalf of Lance right after.
Nice.
All right,
And then
Jude.
after Lance, we'll jump back to agenda topic 3. So we can, last time agenda topic 3 did well. And so let's see if we can get it in a little bit earlier. Perfect. All right. What's up, Jude?
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Chris.
Hey, great to see you. Like your jacket.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. This is actually just like walked in. This is still like my actual outdoor coat, but it looks like it's an actual jacket. I'm in Chicago where it's like, it's May, but it's still very, very
understood.
Very
yeah, I was in a jacket sort of like that today too.
Yeah. Yeah, so my question is more of a branding question. So we are looking to start our podcast, and our industry is the apartment industry, so real estate. We work with luxury high rises.
Okay.
But despite the fact that it's luxury high rises, they are very, very behind on technology and very slow to adopt or really like make any changes. So we are really looking to go to market as a challenger brand. So really focused around being a rebel and kind of play that up. So play on the fact that the properties that adopt our platform are really rebels. So they are looking to kind of shake things up. And for our podcast, or the industry itself, for what our platform is called resident engagement and experience. So similar to how you might have employee engagement or employee experience, in the industry, it's called resident engagement and experience. So initially, we were going to call our podcast the Resident Engagement and Experience Podcast. So to kind of align with what the industry is used to and really own that space. But as I've thought more about what our approach is going to be, have kind of started considering really playing up that rebel branding. So the option was to consider calling the podcast itself like the Apartment Rebels Podcast, to continue to play up that theme that we are really looking to shake things up. And the properties that are looking to do the same are really the ones that embrace us. So what are your thoughts on that for that type of branding?
I got a good one for you here. It honestly doesn't matter. Either one would work perfectly fine. It all comes down to execution, right? Like if our podcast was called the Growth Marketing Podcast versus the State of Demand Gen Podcast versus the, anything that's not like the Refine Lab show, you know what I mean? Not something that's not like totally branded, but like any of those different names would work because it's what you build around the name that really matters. And so I think that especially there's like certain things like, company name and like there's certain choices that you need to be thoughtful about. And a podcast, I appreciate the amount of thought that you're going into it with, but if you're still like, I don't know which one, I would say just like either choose the best one that you got or flip a coin, because it's ultimately comes down to, can you deliver a podcast that people like, that they want to come back and consume? And then either one will work. The difference on the name, mainly, especially at the beginning, is whether or not you care about optimizing for search or not. If you care about optimizing for search, then you're going to want to think about the resident engagement or whatever other people would search for that. And so like ours sort of like doubles as both, right? State of Demand Gen sort of unique, but it also covers a keyword if someone searches demand or demand gen, which people do. And so there's probably a way that you could blend it. Like Apartment Rebels might come close. But I imagine just the word apartment in terms of search on a podcast is going to be too competitive, especially at the early, for you to get any SEO benefit from that search engine. And so I'm happy to answer a follow-up, but I think either way, it's going to work well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point to really think about the end goal, which is for us, it is to kind of optimize. It's both branding, but also to optimize for search as well, too, because we do want to own that space. Yeah.
I'll throw out a different perspective. I vote for Apartment Rebels because it's just more interesting. I mean, Chris, you make a good point, and I think the one additional perspective that I would throw into the mix is having a catchier title is just a little bit more exciting. And I think the thing that you want to think about when you're launching a podcast is, how can I strike the right balance between creating educational and valuable content for the person that I, hope will consume it. And then how can I throw in a dash of entertainment or humor or something to make it something that, someone wants to actually get up on a Saturday morning and listen to while they're, going about their weekend. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, for what it's worth, just to throw my perspective into the mix.
Yeah. And then I like, in every single thing that's sort of like a newer category or different things like that, every industry is slow to adopt, right? Like I would argue that that SaaS companies are slow to adopt demand gen versus lead gen, right? But there are like, and so you probably have the same situation, right? Luxury high rises. There's a pocket of luxury high rises out there that are forward thinking, innovative, want to do new technology, do things better. You just need to find who those people are, right? And so it's about, as a marketer, right? Luxury high rises, but what are the other signals, whether it's firmographic or psychographic or technographic, whatever, that would make them even better or have more affinity to you? That's the thing, right? Like CMOs that we do marketing in a certain way. So, right. So CMOs that listen to podcasts, that spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, like, right, will naturally encounter our content more than ones that don't. And so you can sort of pick your channels and pick different things, but it's about teaching people something which attracts them to the way that you see the world, which is forward thinking and innovative. And so you just need to figure out how to educate and deliver that information in a way that they want to receive it, so that they understand why. If it's a better product and a better way to do something, it's just a matter of communicating it effectively.
Cool. Appreciate the insight, guys.
Awesome. Great to see you.
Good to have you on tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that it's agenda item 3 time.
Okay. We'll get to Lance afterwards.
Yeah, I'll do Lance after, and then I think Paul has a question as well.
Okay. So maybe we overpromised on this agenda topic, but we'll see. So it says the state of events for the rest of 2021. And I'm going to drop a huge caveat in here that I barely watch the news. Like, so I don't really understand what's going on from like a situation perspective, or what capacity limits or what those timelines are. That's not the angle I'm coming from it with. I'm just using the things that I see as a human. I'm being invited to speak at events that are less than 50 people coming up in the July type of time frame. I've shot videos with no audience already. And so there's like, things are starting to emerge where people are traveling, people are going to be going to gatherings and different things like that. May not happen tomorrow, but surely by the end of the year. And so I think that the white space in events over the next, whatever the rest of the year, 6-7 months, is in the highly curated micro. And highly curated micro with the massive caveat that you must record the content so that it can be repurposed for the internet. And if you're doing it so it can be repurposed for the internet, where you're going to have way more scale and way more reach and content production, all those different things like that, then you don't need to have 1 million people at your event, because the people see the content when it gets distributed on their own time. They don't need to be in the certain city. They don't need to tune in live. So you give it asynchronously in the way that people consume content. I think that's, to be honest, I think that one of the reasons I never even made a Clubhouse account. I can't believe I'm on this tangent, but I never made a Clubhouse account for 2 core reasons. It required live viewing, and they would not at the beginning allow recording. And I knew for those 2 reasons that it was destined to fail. And so the reason is that the live session, people are busy. People want to consume content on their time, asynchronously, when they're ready to do it, not when you're speaking, right? I love that people show up here live, but way more people listen to it on their own. And so that's an insight that I knew, sort of that component. And so you need to be able to, let's get back on track here. You need to be able to record the content in order to distribute it, which then you can be a lot more thoughtful on what is the event? How can I make it more experiential? Who am I going to invite and why? Where's it going to be, right? And so instead of spending a ton of money building a booth in Q4, which some companies might do depending on how the rest of it turns out, right? Some companies might do that. Like, I've always loved the idea of, what if you put on like this killer event for your top 30 power users that also have presences in some online channel? And then they just customer success, customer delight that gets amplified by customers that already talk about you, that are already evangelists, that already like you, that are already creating content, that are already networked. right? I think there are super interesting opportunities on that one. But I just believe that if companies will take, I've gone through the micro event strategy at a tactical level, but I do believe that just the state of the world, micro events are going to be easier to pull off. And if you're going to do a micro event, you're not going to get the scale of attendance. And so therefore you want to have the scale on the content distribution afterwards. And therefore, because you don't have a lot of attendance, you can spend a lot more time making that content very specific, figuring out who you want to invite, investing the money in high quality production and post-production. And so that's the way that I see events. Sophisticated companies could go to a hybrid model and live stream. I still think that you would do as good with an asynchronous without live streaming, just given what I mentioned before about Clubhouse and other things. And so I believe that there's an event strategy around it, but I believe that it's mainly a content creation and potentially figuring out how you get third-party social amplification of the people that come to the event.
I love it.
Yeah.
Any questions on events? Oh, here, Joshua has a question. For micro events, do you have to assume paying for speakers?
I think you need to I don't think you need to assume paying for speakers. I think it depends on, I think it definitely depends on who you're asking. Certain people would be thrilled. When people ask me, I require that it's high quality audio and video captured, or I won't do it. And so, some companies will provide that, which is depending on who you're getting, it could be $4,000 to $20,000 expense to get that stuff done. But that's how I do it. I think a lot of people, it really depends on who you're going after, but there's plenty of people out there that would be delighted to speak at your event for free. And then just decide what you need to give them. When I did my events and I had people that would join the events back in early 2020, my deliverable to them was, hey, I'm going to put a room of 40 people together, and mainly interview you so that you can share your expertise, and I'm going to film it all, and then I'm going to post produce it so that you have videos for LinkedIn. Like, that was the pitch for me. And a lot of people that create content already, that's valuable to them. And so it gives them exposure, it gives them more credibility, it gives them content that they can post, and they're not going to set the event up on their own, and they're not going to hire that crew and all those different things. And so you remove all those barriers to them doing something that they wouldn't do themselves. And so it ultimately just comes down to trying to back into what is valuable for this person, and can I deliver it? And is it a monetary, or is it a different exchange of value?
I think the videotape it and give me all the raw footage is way more valuable than whatever the speaker fee would be for that. All right. So I'm going to ask this on Lance's behalf. So I actually hadn't heard of this book. I don't know if you have, Chris. It's called The Challenger Customer, I guess by the same company that wrote The Challenger Sale. And the crux of the book is, David, good for you. The crux of the book is that there are 3 types of online content. Basically, Lance is curious what you think of this framework that they lay out in this book. So the first type of content is for brand awareness. So for example, a podcast is a good example of what that could be. The second is content that's going to change the buyer's mindset or challenge their current way of thinking. So for example, like a white paper, perhaps. And the third type of content is basically to explain your products and services and, explain the value prop, why they would want to consider purchasing what you're selling. Each type of content has sort of very clear, purpose, whether it's sort of brand, challenging a status quo, or informing about product or service consideration. And the way Lance is thinking about it is it seems to sort of separate some demand gen from selling. And so he was just curious to get your feedback. Like, how does that framework resonate with you? What do you think about that overall?
I don't have any particular holes to poke on it, but for some reason I just don't align with it. I don't know. Like it does. I think it's more, I just don't think it's that simple, right? Like why is content that's challenging the status quo not good for brand awareness? It's basically what we do here, right? Like I educate people on the things that there are clear opportunities for things that they could be doing better. And I show them that data and I tell them about it. And then I show them what they could do, which is challenging and creating brand awareness and creating product consideration all at the same time. And so I don't see that there's just one specific purpose for something. I think that's quite a short-sighted way of looking at things. I think I looked at when the book was written. It was written in 2015. I think quite a bit has changed since then. And so I don't have anything specific except for what I mentioned, but I just feel like there's probably a more robust way to explain how it works today.
And I think where I thought you were going to go with this, and it's interesting with like the challenger customer, like even using the word customer in the title, the framework is really framed up as what is in the best interest of the company to get the message across versus what is actually valuable for your customer to learn and consume and hear. And so another interesting,
like what is content for brand awareness? If it's not challenging or changing or focused on your product or different things, like what type of content is created through brand awareness? I'm not sure, right? Like, help me understand, because I see a lot of companies that try and emulate companies like Goldman Sachs and what they're doing on LinkedIn, which is create a video that's so top of funnel about, something that has nothing to do with their product, and spend $100,000 in media running it to poorly targeted across anybody, because they're literally just taking that money and it's an expense and they don't care anything about the results. And they're doing that for brand awareness. And then the $25 million ARR SaaS company gets their advice from a LinkedIn ad rep that that's the good thing to do. And so they do the same thing and they take $100,000 and they throw it in the trash. And so I think companies really need to think. I find, honestly, when companies say, hey, we're doing this for brand awareness, it's typically an excuse to not take accountability for results of those programs. And that's challenging, because we run a lot of programs that work way better, that get scrutinized, and we don't chalk them up as brand awareness, right? And so trade shows are a massive one that we continue to hear. Display ads that definitely don't work. People chalk it up as brand awareness, as an operational expense that is not accountable to results, while they just run poorly targeted things out of Google that people never see, and say, hey, it's for brand. And then you do the exact same thing that's hyper targeted inside of LinkedIn, and the expense gets scrutinized. And I'm just like very, very confused. They pick certain channels that are easy to measure. The ones that they chalk up as for brand awareness that aren't generating results are easy to measure, and they're not working. And so they say they use brand awareness as the excuse. And I think people really should rethink that.
Yeah. And I think this model has kind of the like broad awareness, and then like challenging the problem and the solution, and then like, here's what it is. So it's like also assuming that your customer is going to go through this linear consumption process. And we've talked about this before about it's so noisy today. It's not clean in that way. And
maybe I have a different way of looking at it. So I would, let's see how I can fit this in. So I would think about it above the funnel. Okay. So I might think about it slightly differently, which is that that is based on the buyer intent level or buyer stage. And so I would have my first bucket called above the funnel, which would be things that you might consider brand awareness right now, but also strategic narrative and thought leadership and live Q&A and podcasts and organic social and all these different things that I'm doing to create attention and awareness for my company by delivering important things that help people, challenge them to think or have a better opportunity to do something or different things like that. And then the rest of it is called buyer enablement, where once a buyer has decided they want to go and look and do more research about something, that you have all the necessary things that they can go and find on their own. And I think that's an interesting sort of look. I know that as a buyer, if I reflect deeply on my things, that's how I do it. I'm just in the wild, talking to peers about what they're doing, looking at things on LinkedIn, seeing what's got my attention, looking at different challenges that we're having in our business that have opportunities to be solved. Eventually things click and I'm in buy mode for something. And I typically have a brand in mind because they've already educated me on the problem that I didn't know that I had. And then I'm in buyer enablement mode, where you better have all the stuff that I'm looking for in order to have an efficient buying process on my own to go and find that. I want to know pricing. I want to be able to look at a demo or go into product led on my own, not with a sales rep. I want to be able to get in touch with somebody when I'm ready. There's probably a ton of other things, case studies, industry docs, depending on who you're selling to, developers, there's a ton of different things that you might need. And so I think breaking those into those two buckets would be an interesting way to look at it, where above the funnel has the only goal is attention and change of perception and education. And buyer enablement is all the things that people want to find while they're considering whether or not to buy something. And then another thing that I want people to think about is that if you broke it into those two things, it's so interesting that if you had marketing source revenue coming through, how more companies are not thinking deeply about how to optimize their inbound buying experience. It blows me away. It would be a major differentiator for so many companies if when somebody came to your website and they were qualified and they wanted to buy, that they could book a link with a rep or they could chat with someone on demand when they wanted. And I know that you don't do it because you have routing problems and all these different reasons. Like, fix those things so that you can deliver an fantastic buying experience for your prospects, right? And so perhaps you need to deterritorize. Perhaps you need to have a different way so that there's a certain team that handles the inbound. I don't know. You can figure out your process. It's about how do you optimize the buying experience for your customer? Because in the future, if you do marketing well, 50, 60, 70% of your revenue is going to come through that stream. And I don't know why you wouldn't spend a ton of time optimizing that process around your customer. It just feels so obvious, right? Like, I get that maybe you're only getting 20% of revenue right now, and then do marketing well. And then next year it's 35. And then the following year it's 50. And then the following year it's 60. And the way that you get there is not just by doing more marketing. It's also by improving the entire process all the way to revenue. And so, yeah, I honestly, I'm just surprised that more companies don't focus on that.
Lance, look at what you inspired. Great segment.
Yeah, there was a couple of things I got. Yeah, interesting. Cool. Some new ideas.
All right. Paul, really excited to bring you on. I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question live. This is another one. I don't know what he's going to ask, but let's do it.
Well, hopefully it will be very simple compared to other people. So I'm much more of I'm a sales guy. I'm not a marketing.
Cool.
I'm not necessarily steeped in marketing. I've been a few startups that had marketing, and one of the reasons why I like your stuff, Chris, is that you do what I wish the marketing teams I had worked with had done, or you talk about the things that now. Yeah. The nice thing about that is I appreciate that. The bad thing is now that I sit here with no marketing at all, and I'm kind of having to do it myself, I'm realizing, well, there's certain skills that people have around building things that look good, understanding how things work. So if you were someone like me who's been in sales for, I came out of capital markets trading, banking sort of stuff, and I've been in software for that for 25 years. So I'm very steeped in understanding the content side. But where would you start if you really weren't doing any marketing at all right now? Like, what would be the first thing you did? And knowing that, you don't want to look it's hard with complex content. If you go too deep, nobody wants to read it. If you don't say enough, it sounds like it's trite and you're just playing buzzword bingo. And then, where do you start also if you're small and you don't have a big budget? So I hope that's not too general a question, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Just more of a note for salespeople that might be listening to this. If you're paying attention, the best sales reps are becoming strong marketers. It's a really interesting trend. And so, Lance, this is a great opportunity for you. I have said for a very long time, I think probably since 2016, that the path to becoming the number one rep is becoming the best marketer that's a rep. And so, because you can go in, you can curate your network on LinkedIn or in a different place. You can have people on a podcast or coffee chats or different things like that. You can put content out. You can be inside of a community. You can comment thoughtfully on the posts that they have and engage in different things like that. So I think this is more, I'm going to answer your question afterwards, but this is just a note for individual reps. Like there are companies that have 3 or 4 people on their team that engage with my content, and I am way more aware of their company because of it. You know what I mean? Like, so like that's a strategy that not a lot of people are doing. Like I would have never ever sought out that company, would have never heard of them, and now it's the only one I know that's in that category. And so as an individual rep, I think just being a part of the community, the place, I think is a really interesting idea, and doing it authentically, right? Not trying to get someone into a meeting, doing someone as if you were just like, trying to hang out with them or be their friend. You'll get to learn a lot too. So I think that's an interesting step one, actually, now that we talk about it, right? Like find out where they're hanging out, see if you can start following some of them, see what they're posting, what they're saying, different things like that. It gives you a little bit of an insight. From a marketing standpoint, I think, how big's the company you work for?
It's about 20 odd people and a couple $1 million in revenue. So.
Okay. Yeah. And so is your plan to sort of like try and stand something up?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what's the best bang for my buck. I mean, I only started a little while ago, and I'm still in this phase of even catching up with everyone from the industry and telling them what I'm doing now. So it's not, but at the same time, I can also see I'm going to run out of that. There's only so many people who are dying to talk to me, believe it or not. And, then after that, I need to get something where people are coming to me, because I think also the shift is different. When I started doing this, the art was knowing people so you could make calls, right? I'd have to know somebody who would give me the number of someone sitting on the desk who know the guy who was running IT, or, and it was a networking thing. But now all those people are out on LinkedIn. Everybody knows their name. Everyone's trying to get their phone number. Nobody even answers their phone anymore. No one looks at their emails anymore. So what used to be, wow, you found me, you must be the right guy, is now, I got 80 calls today. I don't even know who you are, and I don't care. And so I've got to figure out a way around that. Because of a different paradigm. So.
It's about being able to get everything that you need to get done from a short-term standpoint on about 60% of your time, and then using the other 40% on things that don't involve short-term actions like calls or meetings or different things like that. And I don't know what the split is, right? I'm just throwing out a number. It could be 80-20, it could be whatever. But it's about starting to allocate that time, right? As a rep, you're torn, right? Because you have a quota or different things like that, and you got to do stuff. And so you need to figure out how you can accomplish those things while also creating some space to get things moving. And I think literally the easiest way is just to become part of a community where the people are already hanging out. If you act in the right way and you add value and you're authentic, more people will be aware, which gives you opportunities in the future. Then you'll know who to have on the podcast. You might already know these things, who people would like if you did a LinkedIn Live, right? And you can do certain things like that in niche or like sort of like closed industries. The numbers are not that important, right? Like I work with companies that sell $500,000 ACV deals, and they're upset when they only get 15 people to one of their events. And I'm like, there's 15 qualified accounts at your event. Think about, you know what I mean? And so I wouldn't get so caught up.
That's where I am. I wouldn't
get so caught up in the numbers, because like the value of those views, if they're very narrow and specific, like, right? Like some people don't like posting specific content because it gets less likes. But it also, you're right. Like if I posted career advice and all this different, and I have done this before, I would get 10 times as much engagement. I'd have way more followers. I would do all that different stuff, but it would not serve the business purpose of why I'm there. Right. And so I'm happy to go way more narrow and have specific titles and get 300 likes instead of 3,000, because those 300 mean way more to the business than the 3,000 would. And so that was just more of a note for people to think about the number standpoint, because going very specific, detailed value add might actually be the route for you.
Right. No, that makes sense. And would you recommend, I guess the question of this is, would you recommend being, is it better to get something out there to make it, or making sure that it looks good? Because, I
definitely get it out there.
Better to get it out. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah. Do it so it doesn't so it doesn't embarrass you or offend, the company. There's certain guide, minimum quality, right? But
Sure.
the idea that the video was only in 480 and it was grainy, or I said a couple extra times, or I didn't like how my face looked that day, or whatever those things are, you just need to get rid of them. The quality of the information is always more important at the beginning. And then you can, as you get clear signs of success, of people that like the information, that are receptive to it, that things are starting to move, it gives you confidence to go and invest in further production quality over time, and you figure it out over time, right? Like the setup that I have right now is way different than the one where I started. I was using my MacBook camera, terrible lighting, different setting, and so you can work your way up to those things. That the only thing that matters at the beginning is if people listen to this, do they get value, and are they going to go tell someone else how good it was, or share it with somebody? That's the signals that I'm looking for.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Happy to help.
Thanks, Paul. Good to have you on tonight. It's time for my celebrity friend. You all know him as Nelson. GL made him famous, and he's back.
I think he's already forgot about you with all his fame.
No, he DMs me every Tuesday night.
How you doing?
What's up, Nelson?
What's up?
Can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, we could hear you. What's going on?
Oh, wait. Oh, no.
I know. Got to see that pretty face, Nelson. And in the meantime, you can ask your question while you're getting your video on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry. I put my video on, but I'm out walking in San Diego and my attire isn't exactly kosher for this.
Yeah.
But I would say, as a salesperson, someone mentioned commissions earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of research on that and have written extensively on it. I'm going to publish that shortly, but I would argue that you're far better off eliminating commissions altogether. And we can talk about that, and anyone can hit me up on that. The question I have for you, Chris, if you can help out. So you mentioned optimizing revenue across the buyer's journey. And I'm wondering what you're seeing, successful versus unsuccessful process in sales and customer success that you've observed or have heard from other marketers. So even if they're doing all the right things to get buyers in the door, then once they're with sales and customer success, you mentioned a few things like lead routing or maybe handoffs. I was wondering if you can touch upon that and what marketers could do to help, drive maybe some process improvements, even though they're not technically sales or they're not customer success, they're still liable for revenue.
Yeah, totally. I think that part of a demand gen role is the operational component between lead and revenue. The planning, the analysis, the process optimization, the strategy, getting feedback from customers on what you could be doing better. That is a major component that I don't think a lot of demand marketers focus on. The reason that I started focusing on it, and I know this quite well since I've been doing it for almost 5 years now, is because the CEO of the company that I worked for only cared about revenue. And so if I'm getting scored on revenue and I'm delivering these leads, I need to understand what the funnel looks like. What are the details? When leads are falling off, why is it? Is it because of a process thing? Is it because of a bad lead source? Is it because they weren't qualified? Like, I need to understand all of those things so I can optimize the system so I can deliver as much revenue as possible. And so I think that every marketer should be looking at that, right? And where was I going to go from there? I'm not sure.
Yep. I have a thought on this one too, Nelson, especially when you talk about alignment between marketing, sales, and customer success. In managing all of those teams at a couple of different companies, I'll tell you, it really comes down to 3 things. By the way, I love get rid of commission. I'm definitely like on that train with you. So we can talk about that later. But it comes down to goals, incentives, and empathy. So if you actually want alignment between those teams, they all have to be working towards the same goals. You would may be surprised or not surprised how often there are literally conflicting goals across the teams that create issues. And then incentives, the same thing goes there. Your goals and your incentives have to be aligned, and there can't be competing incentives across those teams. And then I think the other thing is empathy. Whenever you take the time to have marketing spend time with sales spend time with success, or vice versa, and like people really understand the role that they play, how hard their job is. Everyone's job is hard, spoiler alert. Those are the 3 primary things where if you can focus on getting those things right, like those are the root causes of so many misalignment issues, tension between those teams, conflict that arises. So just to throw that in, I don't know if that sparked any other thoughts from you, Chris, or you remembered where you were going.
I think it's interesting for a company that was starting today to think about what their if they scaled out for the next 5 years, what their company could look like. That might be so much different than how a company gets scaled today. In which case you build a strong marketing source revenue system, that you have a handful of sales reps that are more like consultants or sales engineers that are talking to buyers that are already bought into your brand, that want to buy, that need help in the process, that those people are experts, so they can provide value, that you don't need predictable revenue, you don't need BANT, you don't need all that stuff. You provide a seamless, short buying cycle to buyers that already want to buy. And then you invest significantly more on the success and implementation side to create happy customers, which then make the whole system work. And so it's interesting. And I think his name was Paul, mentioned it, like back in the day, it was about sales rep networks, distribution of products, whether in direct or indirect distribution models of both B2B and B2C products, was a competitive advantage. You have a large sales team, you have your product in every Walmart across the country. In 1995, you have a significant advantage over a company that's not in Walmart, that doesn't have a big sales team, doesn't have the network, doesn't have the access, doesn't have the feet on the street to go and visit people or make the dials or different things like that. All of those advantages have been, for the most part, removed right now. That the distribution layer of products is actually less of an advantage, as you see direct to consumer brands crush companies or private labels or different things like that get distributed through massive retailers. And the same thing is happening on the B2B side with the sales rep. So that's why you see introduction of some product-led motions. I think that the overall system will need to change, and having a large sales team is nowhere near as of a competitive advantage as it was 15 or 20 years ago.
Got a follow-up, Nelson?
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Nelson's in. Hey, I want to see that report when it's ready.
You got it. See you next week.
Cool.
Enjoy the sun. All right. Well,
I think we're good. Let's have a little bit of an early one, people. I was telling somebody, I forget who I was talking to. Somebody, they were I think we were talking podcast strategy, and she was like, yeah, my entire strategy, I want to make my podcast episode short. I was thinking less than 6 minutes. And I was like, okay, cool. But the main reason that she wanted to make them less than 6 minutes that she mentioned was that people won't listen to 90-minute podcasts or hour-long podcasts or different things like that. And this is for everyone listening. I mentioned it to her. It's like the length of the stuff doesn't matter. Joe Rogan's podcasts are 3 hours. Ours are somewhere between 1 and 2 hours for the most part that people listen to. And there's plenty of 3-minute podcasts that I can't stand to listen to because they're not good and they're not engaging. And so whether it's a podcast, whether it's a long form video, whether it's a blog post or a white paper, any type of content asset, the length of the asset does not matter. It's whether or not it's valuable and commands the attention of consuming the entire thing. And so I'll leave you with that little pro tip on the way out. I'm not sure where that came from, but appreciate all of you. You know, Megan, maybe you close this one out.
For that. No, it's been an awesome episode. We're on a great run. You know that I love you guys. Excited for next week. Wait for my next opening number. I think about it now, what I'm going to do for my warm-up act. Bring your questions. See you guys next week. Thanks for coming.
Cool.
Have a good one, everyone.
Have a good week, everyone. Bye.